Hey guys, it's Rashab, and I'm back with day 8 of my road to Civil War. And in this one, I'll be reviewing Thor the Dark World. Thor the Dark World was directed by Aaron Taylor, stars Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Natalie Portman, and Christopher Eccleston. So, Thor the Dark World is the sequel to Thor and a follow up to the Avengers. And it basically shows Thor return to Asgard and he has to take on an ancient threat from before the dawn of time and basically stop the Nine Realms from falling into darkness and chaos from the plans of an evil dark elf called Malekith. He has to team up with his brother Loki to stop the elf from destroying the Nine Realms and plunging them into darkness. So Thor: The Dark World, as I stated in my review of the first Thor, I wasn't that big of a fan of the Thor movies. Like I thought it was okay, but I wasn't that big of a fan, so I didn't really have many expectations going into this movie. So I'm still not sure whether or not I like this movie worse or better than the first Thor. So yeah, I'm just gonna start off with the positives. So first of all, I don't know what happened, like if just the director of the first movie was bad or whatnot, but Chris Hemsworth, he's just been getting better as Thor. Like as I stated, I didn't really like his acting in Thor. Like I felt like anyone could play him, but now I can't really see anyone else as Thor. Like after he was good in the Avengers, and he was even better in this movie. So I thought Chris Hemsworth as Thor was great in this movie. I really loved Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. I mean, she was more or less the same character she was in the first Thor, like just a scientist who's exploring things that she doesn't know at the moment are Asgardian or like from Norse mythology. So she was more or less the same character, I guess. I really, I know I've said this a lot, guys, but come on, Tom Hiddleston is amazing as Loki, and you have to admit he always steals the show in whatever movie he's in. I really love the way that they played Loki in this movie. So in the first two movies, he was basically the villain, but in this movie, he has to do some good guy stuff. He has to team up with Thor to take on Malekith, and it was really cool to see Loki play, I guess, a good guy in this movie. And I have to say, he was pretty good as a good guy. Like even like Loki was like to Thor, "You must be pretty desperate to come to me for help." And then, yeah, it's true because Loki is like a pretty bad guy, and like no one really trusts him. He's the god of mischief. Nobody really trusts him. But then Thor, like he needs Loki's help to take on this new threat. So that was cool to see him as a good guy. I didn't know it at the time who played Malekith, and it wasn't until my second viewing of Thor that I realized it was Christopher Eccleston, who's actually the ninth Doctor from the BBC series Doctor Who. And I have to say, this is like one of those times where they cast a really good actor in a really bad role. So don't get me wrong, his acting was superb as usual, but the character he played was like a pretty bad role. But I'll get to that when I talk about the negatives. The story was... It was an interesting story. So basically, it shows that the Dark Elves, which are the bad guys in this movie, are an ancient enemy of the Asgardians, and they've been around since the time of Odin's father. So Odin's father was the one who actually defeated them in a war and banished them to their own realm. And at the same time, he also claimed their most powerful weapon called the Ether, which is basically like this reality-changing weapon that can do whatever whoever's wielding it wants it to do. So yeah, so it shows that now the Dark Elves are back and they're seeking revenge on Asgard for what they did in the first war, and now they want to return the Nine Realms back to darkness. So, and they're led by Malekith. And he was there during the first war. He was the first one to get banished by the Asgardians. So he hates the Asgardians most out of the other Dark Elves. And so basically now he steals the Ether. Actually, no, he doesn't steal the Ether. So what happens is, and I'm still not sure exactly what exactly happened, but when Jane Foster, she's in the UK, and she's visiting this place because some locals reported some scientific anomalies going on there. So she basically blacks out randomly at one point, and she wakes up in a place that's not in any dimension or realm. And even Heimdall, who's like the person who can see and hear everything in the nine realms, that's his power, like one of his powers. Even he said that he couldn't see her at the time. So basically, she absorbs the ether into herself. So basically, she's like the main target of everyone. The Asgardians want to imprison her on Asgard and use her as bait for the Dark Elves. The Dark Elves want to harvest the ether from her and then return her realms of darkness. So, and then Thor's like basically stuck in the middle. On one end, he doesn't want to see the nine realms get plunged into darkness again. But on the other hand, he cares about Jane, and he really doesn't want to see her imprisoned on Asgard and used as bait. So basically, with the help of Loki and a few of his other friends, he basically springs Jane from Asgard, and he devises a plan to use her as bait to lure Malekith in another way. So, and that's where Loki comes in. So the action sequences in this movie were actually really good, and they were way better than the ones in the first Thor. So, I really liked the villain Curse. He didn't have much dialogue. I think he spoke one or two lines. But he was a pretty cool villain. Like, he's like one of those like strong, silent type villains, like Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. So yeah, he actually he's the first one to infiltrate Asgard. So Malekith uses him as like, I guess, a mole. Like, he disguises Curse as another species from the Nine Realms, and then he's basically captured by Asgard in a battle on purpose, and then he basically infiltrates Asgard, and at the same time he also kills Thor's mother. So yeah, that's actually part of what motivates Loki to help Thor, because as much as Loki hates the Asgardians and his brother Thor, the one person he actually cared about was Frigga, who was the mother, because she was the only person who fully trusted him, and like she was actually the one who taught him magic and all. So yeah, and the battle between Thor and Loki versus the Dark Elves was also pretty cool. It was cool to see Loki like fighting like in the way he did, because like in most movies he usually gets his butt kicked either by Thor or the Hulk or whatever, but in this movie he kicked a lot of butt. He fought those Dark Elves by himself and like beat them all, and he also saved Thor from dying. At the same time, he sacrificed himself to save Thor. Well, sacrificed, because he comes back at the end, and that was another cool thing I liked about this movie. The ending, it was like a cliffhanger ending, so it shows like after Thor defeats Malekith that he's talking to Odin, and Odin's like, how can we ever repay you for what you did for saving the Nine Realms? And then Thor was like, I don't want any reward, I just want to live my life as worthy as possible and hope that I can fulfill the best requirements that I can. And he goes away, right? And then basically, and then at the last shot of the movie, it shows that Odin like switches over to Loki, and it was actually Loki in disguise of Odin. So that was like a cool cliffhanger, because it raises questions like, first of all, how did Loki beat Odin? Because Odin is like one of the most powerful people in the Nine Realms. So how did he beat Odin? What exactly did he do with Odin? And how will this affect the future of Asgard in the Nine Realms? And I'm guessing those questions will be answered in Thor Ragnarok next year. So those are the things I liked about the movie. The things I didn't like about the movie were, like I said early on, the villain. Christopher Eccleston killed it as Malekith, but then again, Malekith, he wasn't a pretty compelling villain. He's the usual Marvel villain, like a one-time villain killed off in the movie with no real like compelling character. So Malekith, I don't know. I didn't like him. in the comics, I guess. So I said, so that sort of played a role, I guess, in my viewing of him in the movie. But they didn't really try to do anything with Malekith. Like, he's just like, it's a typical revenge story, I guess, for him. Like, he's just seeking revenge on Asgard for the war and banishment, and he wants to return the Nine Realms into darkness. So yeah, I didn't really like his villain. I actually thought Curse was a better villain, even though he was killed off early on in the movie. But yeah, I really didn't like Malekith, even though Christopher Eccleston did a great job as him. I also didn't like the fact that those, I don't know what you call it, I guess like convergences, that's the term the movie uses. I don't know, it's more like the teleportation things. Like during the final fight between Thor and Malekith, like just it would just randomly teleport them between Earth and the Dark Elf realm, and like it was just totally random, and it had like no complete sense. Like even Jane and the other scientists in the movie, even they couldn't fully explain it. So I thought like they were convenient, because most of the time they teleported exactly when Thor was about to die. So yeah, I thought that was just convenient for the story. And yeah, I didn't like the way that Malekith was taken out. So basically, the Jane and Eric Selvig, they create a device that creates anomalies. And basically, the way they take Malekith out is like they throw the devices at him, just 4 of them. Like Thor throws the devices at him because he's the only one who can get close enough to Malekith without dying. And basically, they tear his body apart, like a few limbs here and there. And yeah, that's how they take him out. Like he literally loses both of his hands, and then Thor just uses his hammer to, like, I guess slam him away, slam the last one into him, and then he dies when his ship falls on him. And another thing that I didn't also get in the movie was Heimdall. Like I said, he can see and hear everything. I'm not exaggerating, it's literal truth in the 9 realms. But for whatever reason, he didn't see the ship attack, like invading Asgard, until the very last second, even though it was friggin' huge and right behind him. He only noticed when the shadow of the ship fell over him. So I thought that was pretty dumb. And yeah, that was basically it. And the post-credit scene showed that the Ether actually is one of the 6 Infinity Stones that will play a role in Avengers Infinity War. So the Reality Stone. And it shows that Sif and another one of Thor's friends, they give it to the Collector, and that's, I guess, basically setting up for that was a setup for Guardians of the Galaxy. So that was a pretty interesting scene, because it was the first time I didn't really know what was going on in the scene. I actually had to look it up after. So overall, guys, Thor, it had great acting, it had great action sequences. It was more or less a great story. I mean, not a great story, like a good story, decent story. And the villain, even though the actor who played him was great as him, the villain wasn't great, as most Marvel villains are. And there were a lot of stupid plot conveniences in this movie, and a lot of things, like, they didn't make sense at all. So the direction was okay. So I'm gonna give Thor a 6.5 out of 10. So guys, that concludes day 8 of my Road to Civil War and my review of Thor: The Dark World. So whatever you thought of the movie, just comment below. And as always, if you like to see here and you want to see more, like, share, subscribe, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.